Welcome to the True to Heal podcast. I'm so excited today to have Ben with me, men's coach. And I mean, we've spoken, I don't know, probably for the last 45 minutes. So,
Literally.
yeah, I actually just want and would love, because anyone that I get on the podcast as a guest, I know the story is so inspiring. So I know for anyone listening, especially becoming a men's coach, I really want to understand what led you to this purpose, because I know that our greatest core wounds and our greatest purpose comes from our biggest pain.
Right.
And you were just sharing obviously a bit more about your story, but I don't want to speak into that. So I'd love to hear, like, where did the journey start for you? Give us a bit about your background, because I know you've got addiction in your background.
Yeah.
Then you just spoke about becoming a father. Even that, from what you just explained, wasn't really a pivotal moment. It was after your son maybe was born, or maybe it wasn't. So let's go into your journey.
How far back do you want to go? Do you want to go like childhood and go from there? Or you want me to just talk about, I guess, addiction itself?
Well, let's talk about like your addiction, because I can't imagine that you wouldn't have really known that your addiction came from your childhood.
Of course not.
Yeah, so let's talk about, when did that start? What led you to that? What was going on in your world?
Right. So I moved out of home at 15 years old. If you asked me then, I would have told you that my parents kicked me out, but it really came down to obviously victim mindset, right?
Yeah.
But what it really came down to was they gave me an ultimatum. I was a rat bag kid. Do you swear on your podcast?
Oh, you can.
I was a cunt of a kid.
Yeah.
I was a little prick. Yeah. And what it came down to is they gave me an ultimatum. If you don't like the way the rules are, then move out. And so I packed my stuff and I moved out. And moving out of home at 15 was hard, because obviously I didn't have, the safety net of my parents, and didn't realize how much they'd done for me or anything like that. And I was still at the time working at McDonald's, which was my first job. I think if we actually think about it, it was my first and only job, apart from being a coach. I was going to school, trying to finish my Year 12 certificate. And then I also took up smoking pot. And I always had this business mindset. I think I got this from my father, and I'm very grateful for the way that obviously he allowed me to see money to be made. But the day I started smoking pot was also the day I started selling it. And so I started smoking pot. The first time I bought pot, I bought an ounce, which was enough to divvy up and share around and make a bit of money off. And I started to realize that, I couldn't do all three of these things. I couldn't go to school, I couldn't be a drug dealer, and I couldn't work at McDonald's, because this was just going to burn me out. And I actually got really, really sick. Yeah, I got glandular fever. And, obviously this meant I was missing days of school. In the first term of Year 12, they calculated the amount of classes I actually came to, and it was like the equivalent of 4 days of school. So after the first time, I dropped out of school and went full-time into selling drugs and working at McDonald's. And so I got really addicted to the drugs themselves, because the way they made me feel, and it was like a numbing agent. Yeah. But I think it was more so for me the power, the feeling of importance, the feeling of people needing me. And so that's really where the addiction to the actual addiction came from, right? It was not even the drugs itself, it was the power that the drugs gave me. Yeah. And so 16, I was smoking pot. I said I was never going to touch another drug again in my life. I was like, nah, fuck all those chemicals. I thought, people that use pills and that were dickheads and whatever. And I think I was, 2 or 3 years later, and by this point I'd moved back into home for a little bit. I started to take acid. So LSD, which is obviously hallucinogenic. And I'm sure that obviously there's a lot of people that are listening that have had bad trips. My first trip was unreal. It was really good. And I straight away became addicted to the feeling of being out of control, but in control to some degree. And then not long after using acid for a little while and still smoking weed at the same time, I was, dabbling in MDMA and things like that. I was at a friend's house, and it would have been just before I turned 18 actually. I was at a friend's house, and they had a glass pipe, so meth, ice, as we call it in Australia. And I saw the way that, everyone was getting involved with that. Once again, I felt excluded, and I was like, what's that like? Give me a go at that. And there's something that they say about ice, right? And it's, once you have the first try, you'll continue to look for it for the rest of your life. And it was exactly like that. I smoked the pipe for the first time, and after that, my complete mindset shifted. I went from being someone that was like, no, I never want to touch this stuff, to being, how can I get more of this? And what do I need to do to to get more of this stuff, right? And once again, as I'd previously done with the weed, I saw a massive market for ice, and I started selling ice. So I guess
Huge.
that was the I guess the events that led up to me being stuck in addiction.
Okay.
Right, so because I already had this dependence on drugs, my baseline for happiness was only when I was high. It went from one thing to another, and so I stopped smoking pot. I started smoking ice. You know, I was still using party drugs here and there and whatnot, and this then continued for about 8 years. So 18 till 26, I was addicted to ice, and the only time that I wasn't high was when I was in prison.
Yeah, wow.
So yeah, I spent 4 years locked up over a total of 6 different occasions for various offences due to, mostly due to the ice addiction.
It's huge. I mean, these stories aren't new to me, and I've worked in addictions. It's in my personal life. I've just been around the stories, but just to hear, because I have never experienced it. You know, I think the only thing I've been addicted to is relationships and cigarettes, you know?
Yeah.
Just
I had that addiction as well, both of those.
So just hearing stories, like, all I can do is just, it's because I'm so visual, it's like I can see it. But I just think when I hear these stories, seeing where you are now, it's just so inspiring, because I've worked in addictions and I've seen how meth specifically demolishes lives.
Yeah, yeah.
And, these people will come in for counselling and they'd be high. And I was pretty strict on that. I was like, look, we can't do any work when you're under the influence. I want to support you.
Yeah, you're not really talking to them anymore. You're talking to the drug.
Yeah, absolutely. But just, and then I worked in ED and saw the psychosis that came from meth. And I really wanted to understand why people, turn to drug use. And I think that's probably what took me on this pathway, because the majority of the people that were coming into the mental health units were dual diagnosis. They were addicted to a substance.
Yes.
And had a diagnosis of bipolar, schizophrenia, psychosis. And I was like, is it the chicken and, it's the chicken and the egg effect. It's
right.
like, which one came first?
Of course.
So I'd love to hear from you, because I know obviously we spoke last time about ADHD, because I've got that too. When you used meth, did you find that you would get, because I know obviously as well that you love dancing on the edge of risk.
Oh,
did you find like it was
fringe lunatic?
Did you feel like it leveled you out? Because I've heard this so many times. It's almost like makes you feel calmer.
Thinking back, obviously there was like the initial high, but it really was something that sort of balanced me. Yeah, I felt that it really did bring me back down to earth to some degree. I could communicate, and I was quite shy as a kid.
Yeah.
To be fair, I was very shy and very unconfident, lacking confidence until I went to jail. That was like the, boy to man sort of moment for me, really. But yeah, like it sort of allowed me to step out of my shell a little bit, and sort of brought me down to a level where I felt like I could communicate with people, and was at a place where it was a level playing field for me, if that makes sense, I felt like I could pretty much achieve anything, and that's the thing, like you smoke meth, you feel unstoppable. The sex is fucking unreal. The ideas you come up with are just like out the gate. And obviously, 99% of these ideas never come to fruition, right? You're sitting there in someone's lounge room, smoking a meth pipe, talking about all these things you're going to do in the world. But, like, obviously, then you wake up the next day and you're like, well, no, I'm just going to go get some more meth, actually. Yeah. That's all I'm going to do.
Yeah.
But, yeah, like, for me, it definitely did help me to sort of think a lot clearer and... I guess level myself out.
Yeah.
But obviously the other thing that comes with that is, like you said, I did definitely experience like bouts of schizophrenia and drug-induced psychosis and all this sort of stuff. And because when I first started smoking ice, I was also smoking weed, taking acid, taking MDMA, and you can just imagine the cocktail of these chemicals on your brain. And now knowing what I know, it's like my head just became a test tube for how these things would all mix together. And it wasn't like there was like, any clinical doses that I was having. It was, I'd take a bit of this and I'd take a bit of that. And I'd smoke some meth to keep me awake, and then I'd smoke some weed to calm me down. And obviously,
it's a balancing act.
Yeah, exactly right.
And it was, and donors,
you're exactly right. Like this then led to drug-induced psychosis to the point where I'd be driving along, and I remember at the time I was living in Brisbane in, just off Stanley Road in, what's the suburb? Carina, right? Yeah. So near Carindale. So south side Brisbane, which is where I grew up. And I remember I was sitting in my bedroom one night, and we were there, we were smoking pipe, we were smoking bongs, And my partner at the time was messaging someone at the same time as my friend across the room was messaging someone. And I started wigging out and thinking that they were talking about me and they were setting me up. And I thought there was going to be people coming out the front to put me in the boot of the car. And I absolutely lost it and got a pair of the scissors that we were using to chop the weed and tried to stab one of my friends. You know, it was all made up in my head. But to me, that was so real.
Of course.
You know, and then later down the track, like, I sort of, you know, that was it. I ended the friendship with old mate. I had this lack of trust for this girl as well, which I already had a massive lack of trust for women because of my first relationship getting cheated on. And obviously the drugs just heighten all these things. They bring them up and they make you face them to some degree. And I remember driving along, and I was driving through Norman Park, another part of Brisbane, listening to the radio. And on the radio, I thought they were talking about me. I thought that the radio hosts were specifically speaking about me. And I literally lost it, and that was it. And from that point, I stopped smoking weed.
Okay, great.
And continued smoking the ice.
Yeah.
But then the schizophrenia and the obviously drug-induced psychosis sort of dulled down a little bit. But I was still always on edge. You know, and I think that that's, even sometimes I still experience to this day, I still get that. If it's like a bit of anxiety kicks in, it brings me back to that time.
Yeah, I think your body remembers.
Definitely does.
You know, like there's so much trauma that's created through that. And I mean, for anyone listening, I think this is a great conversation for people that, I feel like everyone is affected by addiction, you know, and I feel like it's not really understood. Because like I said, I've not had an addiction to alcohol or substances, but I've had it in my family. So I've always had this deep empathy for understanding it for some reason. There's not really been judgment. Do I understand why they can't stop? Now I do, obviously, because I've worked with it, I've learned about it. But back in the day, like, I would just be like, why are you doing that to themselves? Like, it's just crazy. But from what you know now, compared, like, now you've been through your addiction journey, because I want to get onto your inspiring story, which is going to be amazing. What do you think led you to that in the first place? What do you feel would have veered you on a different path? Or do you feel like you needed to go on that path because that's what's led you onto purpose? There's like 4 questions in that.
If I think back to it, I might attack that in a couple of different parts.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I guess if I think back to what actually led to it, it would be the way I was brought up and not getting my needs met. And obviously then finding my place in the community of drug takers. Because, I mean, for you've worked with a lot of people that take drugs, and anyone that's listening that, you know, has used drugs knows that if you've got drugs, you're everyone's friend, right? You feel accepted and you feel like, you know, you can actually be part of the group. And I know there's so many people out there that probably feel excluded or don't feel like they fit in, but all of a sudden they find this group of people that smoke meth or smoke pot, and they're sitting around, you know, on a couple of milk crates out the back of a, you know, shopping centre, smoking bongs together, and they've got friends. And so that was what it was for me. It was the acceptance, right? That was probably what led me there. But at the end of the day, the reason that I felt that I turned to the drugs to actually really start with was it was a numbing agent. Okay, it was because it stopped me from having to feel the emotions or the lack thereof that I had to feel from my childhood. And so, like, I actually did an ayahuasca experience. I think we spoke about this last time I saw you. A few months ago now, actually. And the things that came up for me during that experience were just profound. And it literally took me through my timeline of different events in my life that had traumatized me. And there was this one event that had happened when I was 7 years old. And it was this feeling of abandonment, this feeling of being alone, and this feeling of being left out. And I remember I threw this clump of mud I was 7 years old, threw this clump of mud at one of our rendered brick walls, our exterior walls in the house, right? Just being a kid. And my dad lost it. Like, he fucking lost it at me. He locked me in my room for the whole day. And I remember I was in the room screaming, and I just wanted to explain. I was just trying to have fun, you know? I remember, like, specifically just being like, why am I in this room? Why am I locked in here? And I'd scream and bash on the door, and I was kicking walls and putting holes in walls because I was an angry kid. I didn't have any idea how to emotionally regulate, and now that I know what I know that's because I was co-regulating off my parents who didn't know how to emotionally regulate either. Right?
Yeah.
But I was kicking and screaming, and I was like, when I say screaming, I was shrieking, like my voice was like pretty much gone by the end of the day. And I was locked in there from what I remember. Once again, this is my interpretation of what happened. Ask my mum and dad, it's probably a bit different. It was 9 a.m. in the morning till like around that time, like very early in the morning. I'd just woken up. I remember it wasn't too long after getting up, having breakfast, till about 5 o'clock in the afternoon because it was starting to get dark.
Wow.
And I wasn't having any water. I wasn't having any food that entire day. I was just locked in my room. And I remember every time that I'd be like, Dad, Mum, I'd just be met with, the longer you scream, the longer you're going to be in there. Shut up, you know? And so I was like this feeling of, am I not good enough? I just want to be, once again, it's like we have this need to be a part of the tribe. And I was just been excluded from the tribe. And so there was that experience. There was also another experience where my parents were splitting up and were standing around a pool area that we had in our family home. Dad would just gone overseas for a work trip. And Mum was there telling us that she tried to sleep with Dad the night before because I was sleeping in separate beds. And he didn't want to sleep with her and he wanted a divorce. And my sister said to Mum, why would he do that? And the first thing that came out of my mouth was because he doesn't love us anymore. And it was that feeling of not being loved or not being worthy of love. And I remember at that very point in time, I felt my heart just close off. And it was right there that I stopped being able to actually experience emotion, the depths of sadness, the depths of happiness, because I'd closed myself off from feeling the hurt. And so then the drugs, obviously, like I was quite through childhood, like from my adolescent years. This was when I was 13, let's say 16, I started smoking pot. For the next 3 years, I was very attention seeking, trying to get my needs met. Obviously at school, I'd do things that were outrageous, you know, just dumb things to get attention. The class clown, all that sort of stuff. And then when I found the drugs, I was like, this brings me back to that level of normal, and I feel like I can actually be accepted by people for who I am. And so it became that coping mechanism.
I love that. Like, I'm even just thinking now, because I can imagine, like, in the audience, there's moms, there's wives, there's partners, you know, and I just think it's so important, because I do think there's a level of denial when it comes to being a parent of
Almost definitely.
how we've raised our children. I definitely.
We fuck our kids up.
Yes.
It's going to happen, right? But you got to be able to take ownership for that when they come to you and go, hey, this is what I felt.
Well, that was the biggest thing for me, I think, on my journey, is that I would just share my experience to my mom specifically. And, you know, she might say, oh, I'm really sorry that you felt that way, but we were just kids raising kids. You just felt so invalidated.
Right. Yeah.
You know, so it's like,
that's not what happened.
No. Like,
that's not how it was, right? Yeah.
Well, I just went into, well, why do you have kids? Kids at 16. You know, like, you've got to stop using that excuse for some reason. But I think I found from my journey that it's taught me to be a more open mom, a more loving mom, one that owns my own shit when it comes to my kids, takes responsibility. And I think that is what's so important. So if you, like a parent that is listening and, you know, your child's starting to be diagnosed with ADHD and all the things, this isn't like a blame fest of, you know, you've done something to fuck your child up, but it's for you to get curious about, were you not co-regulating, were you not being present? Because I definitely wasn't. You know, there was a lot of business in my life, there was a lack of presence. Yeah, they were safe, they were fed, there was food in the pantry, but was I really around?
I can really talk into that as well, because I know exactly what you're talking about. That's exactly where I found myself with my son. Yeah. And it's the pattern that my father was doing as well, right? Because he'd say he was there, but he was never there, and I felt that. He was never present, you know?
Well, I think that's when we get confused. Like, we think as long as our kids go to a good school, they've got everything they need, they've got great clothes, they've got Nutella in the fridge.
Tick the boxes, right?
It's not actually what they need, you know? And I think this is the importance of the reason, because I just don't agree with diagnosis anyway. Like, yeah, it's great to kind of understand ourselves a little bit more, but we can definitely use it and utilize it into a superpower. But I think a lot of, you know, when our children are acting out or they're submissive, there's something going on
That's
the
right.
layers. And
That's
we
right.
just need to be like, instead of saying there's something wrong with our kids, just get curious. What have they been through? Like, because my daughter went through, you know, a separation with her dad, and then she went really inward, and I remember getting frustrated, like, you're not happy, you're never grateful for life, but I didn't realise I was deflecting my shame onto her, my guilt.
It was almost like you were feeling, like some sort of responsibility for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So then there was unravelling in our relationship, which has been beautiful, but this is the detrimental part that can happen, you know, and I've heard it time and time and time again with people that turn to addictions or, you know, are just veering off in different directions in life that don't look societally normal. That they're in pain. Like, they're trying to escape themselves, and I do think a lot of it is like this deep-seated hatred for themselves.
Exactly right.
That they want to escape. Is that what you felt?
Most definitely. The first time I ever felt pure and like undeniable love for myself was only a few weeks ago at that ayahuasca experience. Because, and this is the thing, like I understand now as well within relationships, that infatuation stage is because you see what the other person sees within yourself for the first time in your life, right? So that makes you feel good, but that's because you're obviously using that person to co-regulate that love for yourself.
Yeah.
And so it was definitely a hatred for self because I felt like, and I remember like vividly, like 16 years old, 15 years old when I was living out of home, I'd get pissed on like a Friday night. I had like this group of friends I'd hang around, and because now I had my own place, we'd all party there, we'd all drink. And I don't know how many times I'd be drunk and I'd call my dad in tears and just abuse him.
Yeah.
And really it was because I felt worthless. And I was like,
course.
you did this to me. You did that. You made me feel this way. Am I not good enough? And it was just that lack of self-worth, And once again, like, if we look at drug addiction and we look at what addiction is, it really is just a symptom of a bigger problem.
Oh, yeah.
And for me, understanding that now, like, it was literally a lack of self-worth, and the drugs made me feel like I was good enough, like I was loved, like I, really it was just a distraction, but it made me feel somewhat normal.
Yeah. And I think I've heard as well, it's like this grandiose feeling, like that lack of confidence that you've had, especially if you've got like this deep hatred for yourself or this lack of self-worth, or, you're flawed in some way because of you weren't seen and heard. And it's so important to understand you don't have to have severe trauma. I'm talking about beatings multiple times a day, but just even that experience that you shared with was similar to something that I went through, where I was left in the cot to cry it out.
Yeah.
Close the door, I'm a baby, you cry yourself to sleep. I was like, I didn't even think that was an issue until I went back and saw it. Because you wouldn't, you wouldn't see it. But now you're just like, oh, that would be terrifying.
Yes.
For any child, no matter what age, to be completely isolated in a room and left to try and regulate themselves.
You're, depriving them of their basic human needs as a child.
Yeah.
Which is to be close and to feel that connection, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. And, this is just a message to anyone that's listening. If you are a parent, it's just really listening to, there's nothing wrong with your kids. Like, there is nothing wrong with your kids. It's their environment, what they've seen, what they've been around, and they're just starting to really understand, like, and form an identity of themselves, of how they can taught themselves to get their needs met.
Exactly right. Yeah.
If that's, they become anxious and, isolated in the bedroom, maybe that's something that keeps them safe and protected. If they're outwardly, expressive and have behavioural issues, if that's what you want to call it, it's really actually looking at the deeper layers, so that some sort of support or help. And I pause because I'm like, the resources are shit in the community.
Yeah.
But this is obviously when you've got to reach out to people like myself and Ben to be like, what helped you in that, And I often, when people come and reach out to me about kids, my child needs help, and I'm like, no, I'll work with you.
Yeah.
Because that's the core of the
That's
issue.
where it comes from, right? Yeah.
It's like if you can help the parents or help the adults to really just understand themselves or how to communicate and see what the children actually needs, because we're human. We're just repeating intergenerational patterns. So it just takes that one person, which could be you that's listening, to change it, just like Ben and I are, to have that humility and that courage. And it's not fucking easy.
That's the thing, right? It's a fucking long road. It's a hard road. It's an ongoing road. And it's uncomfortable. That's why most people steer away from it, right?
Yeah, but I can imagine you, given that you've just shared a part of your history compared to what you are now, like, even though that road, I can imagine at the beginning, it would have felt like a bloody mountain of, like, I don't even know where to start. Like, what does that feel like for you now, having taken those steps? And we'll get into, like, obviously, because this is called the Truth Here podcast. Like, what do you feel is the most pivotal part of your healing? But how do you feel now, looking back on that? Do you still have shame and guilt? Like, does it still kind of get you down? Do you miss it? Or do you just have this sense of liberation and freedom now?
I love that question. So when I think back now, it's actually funny. I had this conversation with my partner the other day, because sometimes I'll talk about the past with her and she's like, I can't see that. I really can't see that in you. I can't see you being someone that was stealing cars and getting in police chases and doing all those things and, being in trouble with the law. She's like, for who you are today, I cannot see that. And the thing is, it actually feels like a somewhat bad dream, but also like a vivid memory. Like, I actually don't associate with who that person was anymore. It doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel real. But the thing is, like, I think something you touched on then was, like, obviously, it was an uncomfortable journey. For so long, I was still stuck in that pattern, right? And even though I wasn't, using the ice anymore, I went from that to cocaine or to drinking, and I was using other coping mechanisms. But, when I think about it now, like, it's just like, I'm almost, I'd say, proud of it. Not proud of the things that I've done, but proud of the ability to actually be able to overcome that.
Yeah.
Because they say that 5% of people that use ice will ever stop.
Yeah.
5%, which is a fucking tiny amount.
Yeah, it's huge.
Right, and that means like, you know, people that won't ever use it again. When I say that, I mean like they won't have like a one night where they relapse and then they're back on the straight and narrow. I mean like there's 5% of people that won't ever actually touch the drug again. And I can safely say that it's been 7 years for me now. And I remember the last time I did it was Christmas. It was 7 years ago, which would be 2017, maybe even 2018, maybe 6 years ago, Christmas time. And I did it, and it was the first time I'd done it in about a year and a half. And I woke up the next day and I'm like, I feel like the biggest piece of shit. Everything I've just worked for has just been thrown away. And I realised I was like, this is it. That's me done.
I've heard that, and you know, I think that's important to share as well. That often we need to lapse
Mm.
to actually learn the deeper lesson of, okay, I've definitely done.
Yeah.
You know, because sometimes there is those old programs and these parts of us that miss, or just want to escape, or whatever it is. And it's just so normal to know, like, that it's okay to lapse and relapse. It's just what you do with that. You know,
Of course.
similar to what you said.
Yeah, well,
And
8
I
years,
think it's
right?
the shame that keeps people in the loop of wanting to keep using more and more and more.
Yeah.
What stopped you? Like, if
What
that
was
was
the
one
actual-
only time?
So what was the actual thing that stopped me? Well, realising that in the past, the things that I'd done right, it was like, you know, going to jail. Everything that I'd done was revolved around the ice pipe. It ended up with me in jail. And there's only one place I'm going to go. It's either jail or dead, right? So, and I wasn't dead. I kept going to jail. And so the thing that really stopped me was looking at this life that I'd started to build. You know, I got out of jail. I started to become, studied to become a PT. And at the time, I was still smoking meth. I was smoking pipe when I was a PT. I was training people on how to be healthy.
Yeah.
And it was like this massive, massive, massive bout of feeling like a fraud, but also imposter syndrome.
You feel it too, don't you, when you're into integrity like that?
Yeah, I really did. And I literally had so much shame and guilt around it. Another thing you said there as well was like, did I keep thinking about it, or do I think about it anymore? Like, I don't think about it anymore, but at the time it was something that was still so prevalent in my mind. Because it was like, as soon as something would get uncomfortable, I'd want to go do the thing that got me out of discomfort. You know, go back to doing the comfortable thing, even though it wasn't making me happy. And the biggest pivotal moment for me, like the actual big penny drop, because I think about it, like to stop smoking ice, it was around my son being born. So when I found out my son's mother was pregnant, I was still selling a lot of drugs. I was still using ice to some degree. And it got to a point where I was in a relationship, I wasn't happy, hadn't been happy for a long time. And I actually ended up leaving her for another woman because I didn't know how to be alone. And still was going through that stage of hating myself, and so finding the love that I needed within myself from someone else. And I actually left her for another woman, and this girl was completely away from that scene. So I'm not going to go too far into it, but my kid's mum was quite wrapped up in the drug scene. Her whole family was quite wrapped up in it. And so I knew that if I was to stay in that environment, nothing was ever going to change.
Yeah.
It was never going to change for me.
Isn't it?
Exactly right. Like you become a product of your environment. You do not adapt to the environment. It adapts. You adapt to it, right? And so this other girl that I started seeing, and obviously left my ex-partner for, had nothing to do with that. She was more of a party girl, so it was like cocaine and drinking. Yeah. You know, and so I thought that was the most, it was more acceptable. But the minute that I left her and got out of the environment, it was the shift. I was like, and I knew this subconsciously at the time, but consciously I was like, I'm not going to have anything to do with that kid's life. Subconsciously, I knew that if I wanted to have anything to do with him, I needed to get myself away from that and set up something better for him. Yeah. So that was a real pivotal moment. But then for the partying side of things, like actually getting off the drugs and the alcohol and using those as coping mechanisms, it was this one time, right? I woke up, and this is like a reoccurring thing that had happened, was waking up feeling embarrassed about the things I'd done, having a lot of shame and guilt for the people I'd hurt or the people I'd done wrong by, and not wanting to look at my phone in case there was a text from someone saying, you're a fucking idiot, look at what you did. And this was like almost a weekly occurrence for me. And it was the 2nd of January. I'd been at a house party on the New Year's Day. I'd driven home from where I was drunk. I crashed my car into the front fence of my house, punched on with my housemate. So I'd woken up with a black eye, and I just remembered like snippets of the night, little flashbacks of making an absolute dick of myself at probably the nicest house I'd ever been in. And having to be escorted out, and I didn't want to leave, and so they told me that one of my other mates was leaving, and just to walk him out, and they locked me out of the house and had an Uber way out the front waiting for me. And I just remember being so embarrassed, so angry, had so much guilt around it. And then from that point on, it was just like, I need to stop doing this to myself. Because once again, I'm meant to be this pillar of health. I was a health coach, right?
Yeah.
And every weekend I was out partying and getting on the bag and, you know, womanizing and, you know, doing all the things, all the coping mechanisms to make myself feel better. And during the week, I'd spend till Thursday wanting to hang myself. And so, yeah, I thought enough was enough, and I knew that I needed to change. I wanted to change, and so I started the 75 Hard program.
Okay, what's that?
75
Hard? Is that the fitness one?
Yeah, so it's 75 days. You got to be sober. You got to do 2 workouts a day. You've got to read 10 pages of a book. You've got to follow a strict diet. Drink 4 liters of water. I've done it 4 times now.
It sounds great.
It's a great little reset. It's hard.
Yeah, well, it's a focus, isn't it?
Discipline,
and it's
right?
not just don't use drugs. It's like fitness, expand your mind.
Yeah.
Like it's a whole holistic approach to that. And is it 75 days?
75 days.
Which feels doable.
Right.
Probably to the ego. It's like, okay, 75 days. We're not just going to resist. So it was difficult.
Yeah, it was difficult, but the first 30 days were like okay, but once I got in the routine, it was easy after that. And I felt the best I've ever felt my entire life. I had this first time of feeling genuine happiness and being excited to wake up for the day.
Wow.
And this is this is the thing. If we think back to, I guess, the things that really changed my life, it was the habits.
Yeah.
It was creating new habits.
Yeah.
Because in the past, all the habits were I do all these things to make myself feel happy. It gets to Friday, I do the same thing I've done every week. It's just like habitual.
So true.
Yeah.
Like how we just do the same thing that makes us miserable every single time.
Yeah.
So was it kind of like a switch for you? Had you been like hitting rock bottom moments until you got to this point?
Yes, to some degree. I'd had multiple rock bottom moments, but then I'd always pull myself out. And then it's like that, you know, away from pain or towards pleasure.
Yeah.
And so I'd be in pain, so I'd do the thing, and it might be not drink for a few weeks or might not go and buy as many bags as I usually would. And like, once again, I was selling drugs at the time, so it wasn't like I had an abundance of drugs there.
Yeah.
You know, so I just stopped using it for a little while. And then I would go out and be like, fuck it, I'm going to go out, one of the boys' birthdays, whatever, and all of a sudden I'd do exactly the same thing. And because I hadn't been drinking for 4 to 5 weeks, or whatever it might be, 3 weeks, then I'd find myself almost blowing out and making up for that 4 or 5 weeks in one night, 2 nights. And then to be like, you know, Monday morning I'd have clients, because I was training clients as a PT from home. I'd have clients downstairs waiting for my garage to open, and I'm in bed, just fucked up still.
Yeah.
Or just not come home.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, this is not who I want to be. And yeah, once again, it happened a couple of times. I had that tap on the shoulder, universe going, hey man, you need to change. Hey man, you need to change. And then I had that like Mack truck moment where it was like waking up with a black eye, crashed my car, brand new car into the front fence of my house.
Yeah.
Like, and I was like, that's pathetic.
Yeah.
You are actually fucking pathetic. And obviously as men, like this is another thing, like as men, as a man, all I wanted to do was be respected by people, be respected by others. And I was looking at my behavior and I was like, how the fuck can anyone else respect me if I can't even respect myself?
Yeah.
I say I'm going to do all these things and I can't follow through on them. And that was the shift. It was just I need to wake the fuck up and stop self-sabotaging, because that self-sabotaging behavior keeps ending me up in the same place.
Yeah. I love that insight. So it was 75 hard, did you say? That
75 hard, yeah.
So you didn't go to rehab, you didn't do anything like that. It was like you just found yourself a different focus. I love this because automatically I think, you know, especially having, you know, because you were in the trenches of addiction, it wasn't like you were on, you know, just smoking pot. It was like everything. And I think a lot of people think, you know, go to rehab, you got to get detox, which absolutely, if you need to, it's relevant. But just to hear a different perspective of it's just about what you focus on.
Correct.
And changing those habits.
Yeah.
That can actually did you have support around you as well at the same time, or?
The thing is, like, I think about that and probably not.
Yeah, okay.
I was the only one out of my friends that wasn't drinking, wasn't taking drugs. I felt fucking alone.
Yeah.
And this had happened twice in my life. So there was a time when I quit smoking ice and I had to walk away from absolutely everyone I knew, and I was the loneliest I'd ever been. And like, I remember, so it had been about 6 months that I hadn't seen my son for when he was born. And I started catching up with him again. And he has a sister. She's probably 10 years old now. She's 10 actually. I think turning 11. And I was a big part of her life as well for a while. That was probably the hardest thing about leaving that whole relationship, was because I had been there for her daughter as well. And one day when I went to see my son, that I won't say her name. Well, one thing that she had said to me, it was like, oh, me and one of my ex's cousins, who was like, I think about 20 something, said that the reason you haven't got any friends is because you left mum. And it hit me hard, and I was like, yeah, I feel like a piece of shit for doing that. And yes, it was the loneliest I'd ever been, but I knew that if I stayed with that environment, I wouldn't be able to get away from all that stuff, right? And so there was that moment where I just felt so alone, and I felt alone for like 2 or 3 months. Like I'd be in the gym working full of people, and I felt so alone still. You know, I literally felt so alone. Like there's loneliness, and then there's being alone. You can be in a room full of people and still feel alone, or you can, you know, be isolated and feel lonely. I feel like they're two completely different things.
Yeah, wow.
And then there was a second time, which was when I woke up on that New Year's Day, 2nd of January, and I just decided I'm going to do 75 hard. And actually, to be fair, I think I actually planned to do 75 hard, and it was almost like I blew myself out knowing that I wasn't going to be drinking for 75 days. And I'm glad I did to some degree, because it was the real, like, fucking punch in the jaw that I needed to go, all right, mate, pull your fucking head in. And once again, because at this time, no one that I knew was doing anything other than drinking, partying. Like I was going out every weekend. I was, you know, we were always going to nightclubs. And a bit of the group that I was hanging out with, one of their good friends, his dad owns like 60% of the nightclubs in Gold Coast. And so, or has like a share in like 60%. So we're always going like and having like, you know, booths and being looked after and all that sort of stuff. And whatever. And it was like that lavish lifestyle, once again, that the lifestyle of rich and famous, which was very appealing, you know?
Of course.
It's what everyone sort of wants, right? They want to be that important or feel that sort of importance, right? And they were all doing the same thing. And I had to literally just walk away from that and separate myself. And I started going to the events, but doing it sober.
Yeah, okay.
You know, so I was actually going to these things, not drinking and whatnot, but I couldn't do that until about a month, 2 months in after actually, you know, getting away from it all.
Yeah, I was going to say that would have been hard.
Yeah.
Did you find it hard? Because obviously I've heard this as well and seen it personally, where you kind of get that anxiety of going into those social situations, and
exactly right.
and
right?
I feel like it's like exposure therapy of doing it time and time and time again. Of course, the first 10 times might be really difficult.
Yeah.
But over time, it just becomes your new norm.
Exactly
going
right.
to these, and you don't feel that same way. Is that what you've experienced?
Definitely what I experienced. It was fucking nerve-wracking, but it was like that, one of those sort of things, and I feel like I'm quite good at this. It's like feel the fear and do it anyway.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, on the other side of fear is where all the best things in life generally happen.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a skydiver.
Yeah.
I was scared of heights. That's the reason I started skydiving. And it was a massive thing for me to overcome that. Same with even just going out in public and not drinking. I felt fucking powerful. I felt empowered because all my mates were there. They were drinking. They were getting sloppy. And I was going home, waking up the next morning, going for a 10K run.
Yeah, feeling amazing.
Oh, it was fucking the best feeling.
Yeah.
But at first, it was so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like, I was looking around, I'm like, how do I associate with these people? Like, obviously my mates, yeah, sweet, but if we weren't in a big group of my friends and we're going out with maybe 1 or 2 people and we're going to a nightclub or something, it was like, well, this is fucking boring.
Yeah.
You know, and I actually started to really see what the, you know, character of someone that was drunk was like, and I was like, that used to be me. It was a big wake-up call.
Yeah, huge.
But, yeah, it was definitely hard because I didn't know that there were other people that weren't doing all the things that I was doing.
Yeah.
Because my world was revolving around work all week, fuck yourself up on the weekend, you know, go out on the weekend. And it didn't matter if I wasn't working hard during the week. Like, as a PT, my business didn't matter because I was making 2 or 3 grand selling drugs on the weekend. And it was like that mindset of, I can make easy money. And back to when I was a child, it was like, well, I don't need to go to school because I can make money. Or I don't need to do this job because I can make more money selling drugs. That just the mindset around it, right? And so for me to get away from that was, yeah, it was difficult because I didn't realise there were so many people out there going to run clubs, getting up on a Sunday, fucking doing things, you know. But luckily enough, I live on the Gold Coast, as you do. And we're surrounded by an abundance of people that are getting after it. And that was really cool to be able to see that, to actually witness that there were other people. Because fuck, prior to that, Sunday morning, I'd probably be still spinning a dinner plate in the microwave.
Yeah.
At 3 a.m, you know what I mean?
You get up on a Sunday, or even like every morning, like I'm walking at Burleigh and there's like people, like groups, multiple groups along the pathway. In the park,
Everywhere.
Exercising, run clubs. But it's interesting because on the way here, I was listening to this podcast and we were talking about, always pops up the reticular activating system, which is our library.
Yeah.
And when we focus on something, that our mind actually starts to look for it, which is true. You know, we're buying a car and all of a sudden we see the bloody car everywhere.
Confirmation bias, right?
Yeah. And it's probably what you're explaining is like, because your focus shifted from the partying, from the drugs to 75 hard, which was health and fitness. I can imagine that you started to see more of that going on around you as well. I mean, yeah, it's everywhere. But you know, when sometimes you're in it, you can't see what's actually in front of you.
You got the blinders on, right? And
Yeah.
even though it's there, you don't see it.
Yeah.
You know, you don't see it. And I think as well the big thing is like the shift in identity.
Yeah.
Because who I identified as, and obviously whatever you believe yourself to be becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. I thought I was a drug addict.
Yeah.
So I found a way to be a drug addict in every situation I could be in.
Yeah.
Right. Same with, obviously getting away from the things. Once I started to, like you said, shift my focus, I started to notice all these different things, and it wasn't that they weren't there already. It's just that now that the focus had shifted, my brain had allowed me to see these things and actually witness these things and experience these things.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was definitely a big part of it. And I think that's definitely something that I work on with a lot of the clients I work with, is like the RAS.
Yeah,
it's like, what are you focusing on? And we don't like teach it as the RAS. It's focusing on the small things they do each day.
Yeah.
Because whatever you do each day then sort of determines who you become, right?
Yeah, well, with the RAS, it's like, it literally filters like 99% of everything.
Yeah, well, there's 60 billion bits of data that we see at any one time, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to go factual here. My partner hates when I do this. She's like, can you just have a conversation and not go factual and fucking actional, like make it logical for me? But it's like 60 billion bits of data. Our head would explode.
Yeah.
So the RAS filters in like 11 million bits of data. Say a sight, smell, taste, touch.
Yeah. And it all comes from our past.
Yeah.
But the beautiful part is that when you redirect your focus like you did, it changes. It can change like pretty much instantly.
Yeah.
Because then, even anyone listening today, just try it. Maybe look for like, I don't know, what they were saying was before what I was listening to is like, go around looking for love hearts in anything, like in trees, for rocks. Like, just start, like, think about something. I want to focus or find this today.
Do you often do that? Have you ever done that?
Yeah, I've started doing it heaps. Have you?
Yeah, I've done it before.
I even just saw a love heart in the movie world sign on
the
way.
Yeah. On the clouds, beautiful example.
Yeah. So anyone listening, and this is what we're basically talking about, even though we're going off track and talking about love hearts.
We're here for it.
It's the same thing. It's the same, like, when you shift your focus from, this is me, I'm an addict, this is my circle, it's all about importance and respect and blah, 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 to it's all about fitness and health and small habitual patterns. That I can imagine from that moment is when opportunities started to open up for you as well in that direction. Is that what then led you to becoming a men's? I mean, I can imagine the whole bloody journey is what has led you to becoming a men's coach. But what inspired you to go like from fitness to
now doing
this?
Is
what I want to do now.
I think so. Obviously, with doing the fitness thing, so I actually never lifted a weight or trained before in my life until I went to jail, and in there it's body weight. And really quickly, I became, I guess, a leader, you could say. Like, I'd train with people, but all of a sudden, everywhere I was going, I was still training because I found this love for it. And every unit that I was going to, I'd have people training with me. And so I sort of felt this, like, pull towards, like, leading in that way. And then, obviously, getting out of jail, I continued to continued to train. And then I thought, you know what, I'm actually going to join the gym and become a PT. And so I had this passion for helping people that might have been the same as me get away from the things I was struggling with, whether it be drugs, alcohol, whatever it might be, and doing that through fitness. And I was doing that for maybe 5, 6, 7 years.
Yeah, wow.
But I started to feel like, and this is the thing, I guess, like when it comes to purpose, like my purpose has always been to help people. I feel that in my soul, to help people. And since a young age, I've always wanted to help. I've always wanted to support. I've always wanted to, be able to lend a hand in some way, make people's lives easier. And I guess my purpose at the time was to help people through fitness. But after 7 years, I started to notice that I wasn't as passionate about this anymore. And I started sharing a little bit about my story on Instagram as a way of me shedding my guilt and shame. So I really came out and spoke about how I was a meth addict for 8 years. And I had so many of my clients and people that I'd met across the last 8 years of being away from it all that go, fuck, I would have never known. And I'm like, thank you. I appreciate that. That's actually a testimony to the work I've done.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I started having people reaching out, like going, hey, like I'm struggling with this. Hey, what did you do? Hey, like this and that and all sorts of stuff. And one day I just decided, I'm like, I'm going to build a fucking course. I'm going to help men and women, and at the time it was men and women, to overcome this. Because I know that if I can overcome 8 years of addiction, and when I say addiction, I mean like being stuck in the depths of it, like I couldn't function. I was smoking meth to go to sleep. I was smoking meth to get up in the morning. My whole life revolved around it.
Yeah.
So that to me is like pure addiction, physical
Absolutely.
addiction. Like my body needed it to function. If I didn't have it, I'd be in bed for 2 days. And if I did have it, I wouldn't be in bed for 2 weeks. So this is polar opposites, right? Talking about bipolar.
Yeah.
Right? And so I just had this pull towards, and I guess once again, it was like the purpose had shifted. I had this pull towards helping people to overcome this. And so I started to use my PT stuff to do that with helping people to create healthier habits, you know. So I started as an online PT coach whilst also still working out of my garage as a PT.
Yeah, wow.
COVID was probably the best thing that ever happened to me because it meant that I shifted out of the gym away from that comfort zone and set up a gym here at home. And that was really good for like 2 years.
Yeah, wow.
But once again, I just didn't feel inspired by it, and I didn't feel like I was growing. You know, I didn't feel like I was going anywhere. I wasn't moving forward in my life. And then I just had this download, and that was just to start to use your story to help people in a deeper way. And yeah, sure enough, I built this course, and just actually, I had this conversation with my first client. Actually, I said that he was my first client on our last call together, actually, and that when he signed up, I only had like 3 modules of the course built. You know, yeah. So
I started my first program like that. I drip fed it.
Yeah.
Week to week to week.
Yeah. And just built it as you needed to.
Yeah, because I think that was the issue. Is like I sat there and thought about it for way too long, and I was like, I'm just going to start it.
Yeah.
Because you know that, and I'm a huge advocate for embodiments. Anyone that comes on this podcast is fully embodied in everything they do. So it's like, you know, when you've been through it, you don't need to sit there and really write it out. Yeah, it's good to have a plan and a structure, but it's almost like innate. So I just needed to start it because I think I was being a bit of a perfectionist and needed my ducks in a row, and 2 more years have gone on and I've been thinking about it still, and I really wanted to help people. And I think that's what gets in our way a lot is we overthink, we don't do, we procrastinate, and we sit in there.
Procrastinate, right? Back to like a fear of failure, or, you know, like a lack of self-worth.
That's what you're towing. You can't stop then. So I
Yeah.
actually launched my program similar to you.
Yeah.
And just then did the next week and then the next
Yeah,
week.
yeah. So the first client becomes like the pilot for it, right? And that was exactly what happened. But I noticed that this first client I was working with, like, so he wasn't an ice addict. He was like he literally lives around the corner. We're really good mates still.
Oh, great.
But so he was a typical tradie, right? Owner of a business, stressful lifestyle, partner, 2 kids, you know, quite nice house, like not rock bottom, but was coming home every day and drinking like, you know, 6 tallies and smoking pot every day and, you know, whatever it might be. And we sat down in this chair, actually in the same office we're in right now. And he was like, oh yeah, I was asking him about like his drug use and his alcohol. He's like, oh yeah, look, I drink most days and I smoke pot, but I don't think that's the issue. I'm really angry. I'm really, really angry. I'm like, okay, cool. And by the end of the consultation, he's like, I think I've got a drinking problem. I'm like, I'm glad we got there because I wasn't going to call it out. I wanted you to get there first. And yeah, then I just became so passionate about helping people with that because within 2 weeks, his life was completely different.
Yeah.
And I started to see that, wow, like this story that I've got that I can draw my inspiration from can help other people, inspire them as well. Because the thing is, like, I guess, and you'd experience this as well, like you use your journey to help others as well. It's like it inspires, but it gives people hope.
Yeah.
Because you're a real person.
Yeah.
Right? You're not a fucking, you know, multi-billionaire that's fucking going, hey, follow this process and do this thing. You've lived the experience.
Yeah.
And that then makes it relatable, bro. Right? So it's just, it's a lot of, I guess, a more relatable piece for most people you work with, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, so this first client of mine blew me away. Within 3 weeks, he ran his first half marathon, hadn't run before. So he ran the Gold Coast half marathon.
Oh, great.
He, a couple of weeks later, did like a 50K ultra trail, which is just like unheard of. People doing this with like that much or that lack of training. And just not long ago, he completed a 100K ultra trail through Noosa, which is like obviously through like the hinterland there, running trails through 100Ks of just bush. And so like that was the first client. And then after that, it just snowballed.
Yeah.
And it just became this thing that it's like this beautiful little beast that I was just inspired. I was waking up every day excited again.
Yeah.
You know, I sit in the computer, right, doing the online thing, but I was fucking loving the calls I was doing because it just gave me that sense of being able to use something that was once so dark to give back to the community and actually give something that's going to, you know, will hopefully change the world.
Yeah.
Because and this is the thing, like Interchange, the business I run, the mission behind that is change the life of one person to in turn change the lives of many.
So true.
Because that ripple effect, like even that first client of mine, after a few weeks, he was calling me just stoked. He's like, I've got mates from back in NZ calling me going, bro, what are you doing? Because I want to change now. I never thought you'd be able to stop drinking, but if you can do it, I can do it.
Yeah.
You
And
know?
it's so true. Like, it's amazing how that one person, just like you and I, like that one person can just have that courage and start on that path, and how immense it can be for so many people in their lives. And that's the point. Sometimes we just need to get out of our own egoic way
and
that's
see
it, right?
a bigger purpose.
Yeah.
To,
you know, it's not just about us, it's about change and how do we create that and see things very differently. And I can imagine anyone listening to this podcast, you're all very similar to Ben and I, where it's like you do see things differently, you do have a bit of rebellion in you, you do challenge the status quo, you do want to do things differently, but there's just fear of like, what is the step to actually start to create that. And then this is why it's so important to obviously get support, you know, work with someone like Ben and I, or someone similar that you feel inspired by or aligned to, because that's when things can absolutely change for you. But one of the things that I've found, which I don't know, I mean, it's important for me, but it sounds like it's really important for men as well. Do you think that, because I've seen this in my partner too, he's completely changed, he's like obsessed with the gym, loves to eat really well, like he just radiates this completely different energy. Do you feel like that's huge for a man? Like, because obviously you just mentioned about your client, you said it's been a part of your journey as well. Do you think it like gives you a sense of purpose and makes you feel good about yourself? Like you focus on, this is what I want to achieve, you know, whether it's $75 days, or like your friend or your client achieving, you know, those momentous adventures that he went on. Like I feel like men specifically need direction in
Most
okay, I
definitely.
need to go from here to here. And then do you feel like that over time builds momentum?
Most definitely. I think there's
Okay.
actually a deeper part of that though. But like with what you're saying there, like we thrive on structure and routine, right? Anyone that says that they don't, like I feel like their life is chaotic, and maybe they just, you know, their emotional home is stress, right? But what I've found with everyone that I work with is that, you know, by giving them structure and routine and things that they actually stick to each day, it helps them to build that momentum. But the reason that I find that is because most of these people I'm working with have no integrity. You know, they want to be, like I spoke about this before, they want to be respected, but they can't even respect themselves by following through on the things they say they're going to do. And so even just by, you know, setting a small goal of maybe I want to go for a 10K run this week, or I want to, you know, get up in the morning and I'm going to do the 3 to 5 things that I said I'm going to do. So for me, it's like the cold shower, the breath work, the meditation, the journaling, doing that every day. It builds trust within self.
So true.
It builds integrity. And then when you can trust yourself, it means that you follow through more so on the things that you say you're going to do, whether it's like, you know, I'm not going to drink this weekend.
Yeah.
Because you've built that momentum with the, you know, the trust that you built within yourself, you're more likely to follow through on it. And so for men, like once again, one thing we want, especially from our partners, is to be respected. If we can start to build that respect for ourselves by doing these small things, it helps us to then build respect with other people as well. And so I think that just by doing those small things, and this is the thing, people might see them as irrelevant, right?
Yeah.
I read the book Atomic Habits, and he talks about the 1%, right?
Yeah.
The 1% habits. Like I thrive on that. I really preach that to the clients I work with, because these little things might seem irrelevant, but you put them all together, they create the big result you're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
And so the small things, whether it's going to the gym, eating well, doing all the things that are for your health, you know, sleeping at a certain time and actually sticking to that, right? It helps you to build that trust, but it also helps you to build that momentum towards that big thing you're trying to achieve, whatever the goal is. Because like you said, the first step's the hardest, right?
Yeah.
And that's why most people get deterred, because that big goal they've got is so fucking far away. It looks so out of reach. They might not trust themselves to reach it, or they might not have the drive, whatever. But by taking those small things and small steps and those small little actions towards reaching that, it helps them to reach it eventually.
Yeah, I love what you said as well. It's like starting, because sometimes I was speaking to a friend yesterday actually, and he was like, "Oh my god, I just feel like there's a momentous amount of things I've got to do, like my health, my fitness, my relationship, my healing, but it's just start with one.
Yeah.
And then when you've got the routine of that, you're feeling really good, then you add the next one on. It doesn't mean that you can't, you know, go for a 20-minute walk a day and, you know, meditate if that's what you want to do. Like, you can definitely do multiple things, just don't go too big, because that's when the resistance comes in, and it's just so important.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more.
But it's just like, I guess, you know, like, I think the overwhelm of the mind, sometimes it just thinks like, I've just got so much to unpack, I've got so much to do. But it's just similar to what you shared, it's just by starting with one thing. And then when you do build that trust within yourself, it is so much easier then to make decisions to head in the direction you want to go in, because you do trust yourself, because I think that's what a lot of us lack.
Yeah.
None of us are taught that. You know, it's like we have to listen to our parents, and even the reality we saw was diminished, because it's like, no, that wasn't what I said, or that's not what happened, or...
Yeah.
You know, and that's where it gets lost over time.
They start to doubt themselves, right? Not trust themselves. Yeah, huge.
Yeah.
Huge.
So it's just like so important. So what is your mission at the moment, Ben?
To change the world one man at a time.
I love that.
Simple as that. And because, like I said, even with Interchange, it's by affecting the life of just one person, that life will then affect the lives of many. And something I really love is it's an African proverb. It's Ubuntu. Have you heard of this?
No.
Ubuntu. It means I am because we are.
Yeah.
As a collective.
I love that.
I am not who I am. I'm not an island. I am who I am because of the people around me. And so by having a positive impact on just one man, and I've seen this play out time and time again, it means that his family are getting well looked after. It means that he's probably looking after his employees in a different way. It then also means that the people around him, his friends, are starting to be inspired, right? And this is the thing, it's that real fit in or fuck off sort of mentality. When you start to change, you'll start to notice who the people are that drop away.
Yeah.
It's like the weeding process, and I think it's a beautiful thing because then you sort of notice the people that latch on want to come with you. And so you're not only growing yourself, but you're helping to grow the people around you also. And so I guess that is my mission, is to inspire husbands, fathers and businessmen, just like it says on my Instagram page, to break free of that self-sabotage and raise their standards for themselves, because in turn by doing that, they can have the life they want to have, they can provide for their family, they can have the business, they can be a better man. And that's really what I feel within the world we live in, we need to have is a better quality of man these days.
Yeah, it's so true. And I just think for the women listening as well, it's up to us to support that. You know, it's up to us to support our men to want to do better, to want to be better. It's not making them wrong and saying that they need to change. But sometimes when we see our men struggling, it's like they can't because they're just in the momentum of the routine. And sometimes it's just a simple, hey, I was listening to a podcast today and heard this story from Ben, and he's saying it's like you, and
maybe check him out.
Exactly right.
You know, it doesn't have to be a
prompting,
force.
right?
Yeah, it just needs to be,
you know, like that gentle encourager. You know, you don't want to ever make your man feel wrong or not good enough and unaccepted, or that he could be doing better when all internally in his mind is just trying to do the best that he can.
That's right. It all comes back to that ego story. And as soon as like someone pushes something on you, it's like, well, fuck you.
Yeah.
It's the ego trying to protect me.
Or again, that's another way that, you know, I'm being told I'm not doing a good enough job.
That's right,
I'm trying as hard as I can.
So yeah, for all of the ladies out here, you know, if you've got husbands, sons, you know, just flick the Instagram page of Ben's ever so subtly their way so that they can get to know him a bit. But like, your story is just amazing, and it's so true in what you said, because your journey is very rare. From where you've been to what you've been through, from the drugs that you've been using, like, it's really rare from the stories that I've seen from the people that I've worked with, that people have come to the level that you have. So I'm hoping that you're celebrating yourself in that.
Oh, fuck yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I still forget to from time to time, but, you know, it's great to have people around you to remind you from time to time that you I have come this far. I was going to say you. I'm taking ownership of this. I have come a fucking long way, and I'm so proud of that, you know?
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, if it wasn't for those experiences, you know, I don't take back any of those experiences, because it's given me this story that I can now use to help other men.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think that's why I needed to get on this podcast, because I know there's so many women that listen to this, and men as well. But what's huge for me with anyone is embodiment. There's so many coaches, therapists, psychologists. Even my journey as a psychologist, I wasn't embodied. I just learned through books until I actually did the deeper work. And I think anyone that is looking for support and help, it's so important that you make sure who you're aligned with has a full embodiment of it. It doesn't mean that they're perfect. Doesn't mean that they're journaling every single day, like, you know.
We're human, right?
Yeah.
But an embodiment of the experience they've been through, and they're actually living and preaching the life that they're talking about, even if they have the off day.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about you, and that's what inspired me about you to get you on the podcast. So thank you so much for joining today.
No, thank you for having me on. I'm fucking stoked.
Where can people find you now that I've like spoken about your Instagram handle?
Yeah, so Interchange Coaching on Instagram. And then if you want to hit all my links, it's just interchange.org.
Amazing.
So
I'll
nice
pop
and
them into the
simple.
show notes too, because you have a podcast, which is
I
great.
do, yeah, the Interchange podcast. Feel free to check that one out as well.
Yeah.
There's obviously I've got the episode with you, but I've got like 90 something episodes there now with just people that have got stories of redemption or got some amazing things to share. So
amazing.
yeah.
Well, I'll pop everything in the show notes. All the links will be there, but don't be afraid to, like I said, socially send Ben's information to your partners, to your brothers, to your friends, whoever. And just make sure this information is shared, because things can change.
Yeah.
With the right support and the right tools around you.
I am. I'm super active on all my socials as well. So if you send me a message, I'm probably going to reply, and I'm happy to have a yarn. So yeah, I like to talk to everyone, because I know that obviously there are so many people out there that just want someone to reach out to so they can understand that this is possible.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
They want to talk to a real person, not a fucking bot.
Yeah, absolutely. Love
so.
that. Amazing.
Awesome.
Thanks, Ben.
You're so welcome. Thank you.
See ya.
See ya.